The morning sun painted the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and blue. Commander Jack Miller stood on the deck of the USS Discovery, watching the waves roll past. He had been mapping the ocean floor for 12 years now. Most days were simple and quiet. Map the seafloor, record the data, move to the next spot. Nothing exciting ever happened. Until today. "Commander, you need to get in here right now." A voice crackled through his radio. It was Lieutenant Dave Roberts, his sonar operator. Something in Dave's voice made Jack's heart beat faster. Dave never got excited about anything. Jack walked quickly across the deck, feeling the ship rock gently beneath his boots. The control room was cool and dark, lit only by the glow of computer screens. Dave sat in front of 3 monitors, his face a mix of confusion and excitement. "What do you have?" Jack asked, stepping closer. Dave pointed at the center screen. "We found something big down there. Really big. For miles deep, sitting on the ocean floor." Jack leaned in to look at the sonar image. It showed a massive object, maybe 300 meters long. At first, he thought it might be a submarine. Maybe an old one from World War II that nobody had found yet. Could it be a sub? Jack asked. "That's what I thought at first," Dave said. He pressed a few buttons, and the image became sharper and clearer. But look at the shape. No submarine was ever built like this. And the metal composition our sensors are picking up, it's nothing we recognize. Nothing in any database. Jack felt his mouth go dry. In 12 years of ocean research, he had found plenty of interesting things. Old shipwrecks from centuries ago. Underwater mountains nobody knew existed. Even a couple of crashed airplanes. But this was different. The shape was too smooth, too perfect. It looked almost like a teardrop made of metal. "Send down the deep-sea drones," Jack ordered. His voice came out steady even though his hands were starting to shake. "I want camera footage. I want to see exactly what we're looking at here." 2 hours later, the entire crew had gathered around the monitors. Nobody wanted to miss this. The drones had reached the ocean floor, their powerful lights cutting to the complete darkness of the deep sea. At first, all they could see was mud and rocks. Then, slowly, something else appeared on the screen. "Oh my God!" someone whispered behind Jack. The object was massive. The cameras showed a hull that was perfectly smooth, covered in strange symbols that glowed with a faint blue light. Even after sitting in the ocean for who knows how long, those symbols were still glowing. The design was unlike anything human. There were no sharp corners, no visible engines, no windows. Just smooth curves and those glowing symbols that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Jack stared at the screen, barely breathing. His scientific mind tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was some kind of experimental aircraft from the Cold War. Maybe it was a secret project that got buried and forgotten. But deep down, he knew the truth. This was something else entirely. "This isn't from Earth," Jack said quietly. The words felt strange coming out his mouth, but he knew they were true. His hands were shaking now as he reached for the ship's communication system. This was bigger than him, bigger than his crew, bigger than the Navy. This was the kind of discovery that changed everything. "This is Commander Jack Miller of the research vessel USS Discovery," he said into the radio. "I need to speak with Admiral Tom Patterson immediately. We have a situation here that requires his attention." The next few hours moved very fast. Jack explained what they had found, choosing his words carefully. Admiral Patterson was an old friend and someone Jack trusted completely. The Admiral listened without interrupting, asking smart questions. When Jack finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the radio. Then Admiral Patterson spoke, and what he said surprised Jack. "Don't touch anything else," the Admiral ordered. "Keep the drones recording, but don't attempt to board it or open it. I'm contacting the International Ocean Research Council. Jack, this is bigger than the Navy. This is bigger than America. This is bigger than any one country." Jack felt relief wash over him. He had been worried the military would want to keep this secret, turn it into a weapon, or hide it away. But Admiral Patterson understood. If this was truly an alien spacecraft, it didn't belong to one nation. It belonged to everyone. News of the discovery spread quickly. Jack's team managed to keep the exact location secret for 3 days, which gave time for the right people to gather. Scientists from around the world started arriving at the nearest port. Engineers, archaeologists, language experts, even philosophers. Everyone wanted to be part of this moment in history. Dr. Emily Foster was the first scientist to arrive at the USS Discovery. She was a marine archaeologist from Boston, known for her careful work on ancient underwater discoveries. She had kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Thank you for calling us instead of just trying to pull up yourselves," Dr. Foster said as she stepped onto the deck. "Of course," Jack replied. "Whatever this thing is, it's been sitting peacefully down there for a very long time. The carbon dating samples we took from the ocean sediment on top suggest at least 12,000 years. Maybe more. This thing could be ancient." "Peaceful," Dr. Foster repeated, nodding slowly. "I like that word. Not threatening, not attacking, just waiting for someone to find it." Over the next few days, more experts arrived. Each one brought different skills and knowledge. They all shared one thing, though, a sense of wonder and responsibility. This wasn't about fame or money or national pride. This was about doing something right for all of humanity. Jack stood on the deck that night, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, someone had built that ship. Someone had sent it to Earth. Were they explorers? Scientists? Were they still alive somewhere? The questions filled his mind. Dr. Foster joined him at the railing. "You're wondering about the builders," she said. "Yes," Jack admitted. "Who were they? Why did they come here?" "Maybe we'll find answers inside," she said softly. "But I think the more important question is, what does this mean for us? For humanity?" Jack thought about that. For thousands of years, humans had looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Millions of people had asked that question. And now, sitting 4 miles below the Pacific Ocean, was an answer. "We need to do this right," Jack said firmly. "Not as Americans or scientists or military. As humans. Together." Dr. Foster smiled in the darkness. "Then we'll do it right. Because that's what humans do best when we remember to work together." Ryan Clark stood in front of 200 of the smartest people on the planet, and he was terrified. At 28 years old, he was probably the youngest person in the room. The conference room on the USS Discovery was packed with scientists and engineers who had decades more experience than him. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. But he had an idea. A crazy idea that just might work. "Traditional salvage methods won't work here," Ryan began, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Steel cables strong enough to lift 300 meters of unknown metal from 4 miles deep would break under their own weight before they even reached the ship." Admiral Tom Patterson, who was leading the military side of the operation, nodded from the front row. "We know that, son. That's why we're listening to new ideas." Ryan pressed a button on his remote, and a 3-dimensional model appeared on the screen behind him. He had spent 3 sleepless nights working on this presentation. "What if we don't lift it at all?" Ryan said, feeling his confidence grow slightly. "What if we make it lift itself?" Dr. Kate Wilson, a metallurgy expert from Russia, leaned forward in her seat. "Explain what you mean." "Buoyancy," Ryan said simply. He pointed to his model. "We attach a network of pressurized flotation chambers all around the ship's hull. We fill them with compressed air very slowly and very carefully. The ship becomes lighter than the water around it. Physics does the rest. It rises naturally, like a bubble coming up from the bottom of a glass. We just guide it up. We don't force it." "Over how long?" Someone called out from the back of the room. 30 to 40 days, Ryan answered honestly. "We can't rush this. The pressure changes as we come up from 4 miles deep. If we move too fast, the stress could damage the hull or even crack it open. Slow and steady means safe." Commander Jack Miller smiled from his seat near the back. This was exactly the kind of thinking they needed. Not brute force, but patience. Not speed, but care. The room erupted in discussion. Engineers from Norway started talking to scientists from China about pressure calculations. A team from Japan began sketching designs on their tablets. People from Germany and Brazil were debating materials. Within an hour, everyone wanted to help solve this puzzle. Dr. Kate Wilson approached Ryan after the meeting ended. She was a short woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "It's a good plan," she said with a thick accent. "Very good. But we need one more thing. We need to make sure we're not damaging something sacred." Ryan looked confused. "This ship might be a tomb," Dr. Wilson explained, "or a temple, or a time capsule left by people we'll never meet. We need archaeologists working right alongside your engineers every step of the way." Ryan nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, absolutely. We'll place sensors all over the hull. If anything starts to stress or crack or show any sign of damage, we stop immediately. No questions asked." Over the next 3 weeks, the Pacific Ocean became the busiest construction site on Earth. Ships arrived from every corner of the planet, their decks loaded with equipment and supplies. It looked like a small city floating on the water. Japanese robotics companies sent their newest underwater drones. These were small, smart machines that could work at extreme depth for months without needing to surface. Norway contributed their deep-sea pressure chambers. Each one was a marvel of engineering that could hold compressed air at crushing depths without collapsing. China provided advanced composite materials needed for the attachment points. These materials were stronger than steel, but lighter than aluminum. The American and Chinese teams, who had sometimes competed against each other in the past, now worked side by side in the same cramped rooms. They shared data freely and celebrated each other's solutions. When a British engineer named Thomas discovered an error in the pressure calculations, a Brazilian mathematician named Carlos stayed up for 2 nights straight to solve it. He ran the numbers again and again until he found the answer. When he finally did, Thomas bought him coffee, and they became friends. A team from Kenya designed an entire monitoring system that would watch the ship's hull for any signs of stress. Their software was so good that other countries asked if they could use it for their own projects. This is how humanity works best. Observe Professor James Morrison one evening. He was a philosopher from California who was writing a book about the operation. When we have a shared goal that's bigger than ourselves, we forget our small differences. We forget about borders and flags and politics. Commander Jack Miller agreed completely. In all his years in the Navy, he had never seen this level of cooperation. Nobody argued about who was in charge. Nobody fought about which country would get credit. Everyone just wanted to see the alien Starship safely brought to surface. Finally, after 23 days of constant preparation, everything was ready. 12 robotic drones sat on the ocean floor, positioned in a perfect circle around the alien ship. Each drone carried flotation chambers and the equipment needed to attach them to the hull. The monitoring room on the USS Discovery looked like a space mission control center. Dozens of screens showed different camera angles and sensor readings. People from 12 different countries stood shoulder to shoulder, watching and waiting. "All teams report ready," Lieutenant Dave Roberts announced. He had been promoted to Chief Operations Coordinator because of his steady nerves. Jack took a deep breath. This was it. Hundreds of people watched the screens, holding their breath along with him. In living rooms around the world, millions more were watching the live broadcast. "Begin attachment sequence," Jack ordered. From miles below the surface, in the cold darkness where sunlight never reached, the 12 drones came to life. Their powerful lights illuminated the Starship's hull, making those strange symbols glow even brighter than before. Slowly and carefully, each drone positioned its flotation chamber against the ship. The attachment process used a system that Dr. Wilson had designed. It created a molecular bond between the chamber and the hull without drilling or damaging the surface. It was like the strongest glue imaginable, but one that could be released safely when needed. The process took 6 hours. Every single attachment point had to be absolutely perfect. The ship's hull was incredibly strong, stronger than anything humans had ever made. But they took no chances. They treated it like the most precious thing in the world, because it was. "All chambers attached and secure," Ryan reported, his eyes scanning multiple screens at once. "No damage to the hull. The symbols are still glowing normally. Everything looks good. Begin phase 1 pressurization," Jack ordered. Deep below, compressed air began flowing into the flotation chambers. The amount was tiny, just enough to test if the system worked. The drone sensors watched carefully for any sign of problems. Hull stress readings are completely normal, Dr. Wilson called out, watching her instruments. The ship isn't even noticing the extra weight. Whatever this metal is made of, it's unbelievably strong. They waited 12 hours before taking the next step. Patience was everything. Jack had told his crew again and again, this ship had waited 12,000 years. They could take their time to do this right. On day 2 of the ascent operation, they increased the air pressure in the chambers slightly. The ship shifted in the mud, settling into a new position. Everyone in the monitoring room went completely silent. They stared at the depth readings, barely breathing. For miles, 127 feet, Dave read off the numbers slowly. She's moving. She's actually moving. A cheer went up in a room that could probably be heard all the way on deck. People hugged each other. Some were crying. They had done it. The impossible was becoming possible, right before their eyes. The ascent took 37 days, and it became the most watched event in human history. Every news channel on Earth showed a live depth counter, ticking upward as the alien ship rose slowly from the ocean floor. People gathered in city squares around giant screens. Families sat together in their living rooms, checking the counter before going to work or school each morning. Children begged their parents to wake them up whenever the ship passed another mile marker. "Mom, please, I want to see when it gets to 2 miles deep," they would say. And parents would set alarms in the middle of the night to wake their kids for just a few minutes, so they could witness history together. 3 miles deep, the counter showed on day 8. 2 miles deep on day 19. The ship rose steadily, never rushing, never stopping. It was like watching a miracle happen in slow motion. Ryan Clark and his engineering team watched every single sensor, reading like their lives depended on it. They worked in shifts around the clock, making sure nothing went wrong. Dr. Kate Wilson's team monitored the hull constantly, checking for any tiny sign of stress or damage. So far, everything was perfect. Dr. Emily Foster's archaeological team had a different job. They watched the symbols on the hull, taking thousands of photos and making detailed notes. And they noticed something strange. The symbols seemed to glow brighter the closer the ship got to the surface. "It's like it knows," Dr. Foster said quietly one evening, staring at her computer screen, like it's waking up. Then, on day 25, something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything. The ship's symbols began pulsing in a pattern, not randomly flickering like before, but in a specific sequence that repeated every 47 seconds exactly. The same pattern, over and over again. "Commander Miller, you need to see this right now," called Dr. Lisa Carter. She was a communications specialist, brought in from Australia specifically for this project. She was young but brilliant, known for her work in decoding complex patterns. Jack rushed to her station. "What am I looking at?" "It's sending a signal," Dr. Carter said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Very faint, but definitely a signal. Not radio waves, though. It's something else, something that travels through water better than through air." Admiral Patterson leaned over her shoulder. "What's it saying?" Dr. Carter shook her head, frustrated. "I have no idea. We don't have anything to translate it with. But look at the complexity of the pattern. This isn't just noise. This is information. Someone programmed this. Someone wanted it to communicate." The news of the signal spread across the world in minutes. Linguists volunteered to help from every country. Code breakers, mathematicians. Anyone who worked with patterns wanted to try their hand at understanding it. Everyone had theories. Was it a greeting? A warning? A distress call from 12,000 years ago? Or maybe, some people suggested hopefully, it was just the ship's version of a heartbeat. Proof that something inside still lived. 1 mile deep, the counter showed on day 33. The ship was now in waters where human submarines could actually reach it. Dr. Wilson took a small submarine down to see it with her own eyes, something she had wanted to do since the beginning. When she returned to the surface 2 hours later, she had tears streaming down her face. Her hands were shaking as she climbed out of the submarine. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she said simply, her voice breaking with emotion. All those symbols glowing like stars in the darkness. And the hull, there's not a single scratch on it. Not from the pressure. not from 12,000 years sitting in salt water. It's absolutely perfect. On day 37, the monitoring room was so packed with people that some had to stand in the hallway, watching through the doorway. Representatives from all 12 participating nations stood together in the front. Scientists and engineers who had worked day and night for over a month crowded around every available screen. The depth counter read 500 feet. Everyone could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. 400 feet, Lieutenant Dave Roberts called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. 300 feet. People started holding hands without even realizing it. Strangers who had worked together for weeks squeezed each other's shoulders. 200 feet. Outside on the deck, hundreds of people lined the rails, cameras ready, eyes fixed on the water. 100 feet. The ocean began to bubble and churn. Water turned white with foam. And then, like a whale breaching, the alien Starship rose from the Pacific Ocean. Water cascaded off its hull in massive waterfalls as morning sunlight touched it for the first time in 12,000 years. The glowing symbols blazed brilliantly in the daylight, pulsing with that mysterious pattern. The ship was 300 meters of impossible beauty, smooth and perfect, hanging there as water poured off its sides. Not a scratch, not a dent, not a single sign of damage. Perfect after all those centuries. The whole world held its breath at the same moment. In that instant, every human being watching felt the same thing, wonder mixed with a little bit of fear, but mostly just pure amazement. A team of 12 people, one carefully chosen from each participating nation, climbed into a small motorboat and approached the floating ship. Dr. Emily Foster led the archaeological team. Ryan Clark brought his engineering equipment, though he suspected it would be useless. Commander Jack Miller represented the military, but he deliberately carried no weapons. This was a moment for peace, not war. They circled the ship slowly, looking for any kind of entrance. The hull was completely smooth, no visible doors or hatches anywhere. Then Dr. Foster noticed that the symbols near one section were pulsing faster and brighter than the others. There, she pointed. I think that's where we're supposed to enter. As their boat got closer, something incredible happened. The symbols around that section began pulsing even brighter, faster. Then a door that had been completely invisible just seconds before simply opened. No mechanical sound, no grinding metal. It just opened, as smooth as water. It's inviting us in, Dr. Foster whispered, her voice filled with awe. They tied their boat off and climbed carefully aboard. The entrance was just the right size for humans, which seemed strange and wonderful at the same time. Had they known? Had they planned for this? Inside, the ship hummed with quiet power, like a sleeping giant taking a gentle breath. As the team walked forward cautiously, lights began activating automatically, illuminating corridors of impossible beauty. The walls were smooth and curved, made of that same unknown metal that seemed to glow from within. The technology was far beyond anything humans could understand. There were no buttons or switches that they could recognize, no controls that made sense. But despite this, everything felt intentional, purposeful, like the ship had been designed specifically for visitors to explore. They walked through corridor after corridor, their footsteps echoing softly. Nobody spoke. They were too amazed, too overwhelmed by what they were seeing. Finally, they reached a large central chamber. It was circular, with a high domed ceiling that seemed to show the stars, though they were deep inside the ship. And there, in the center of the room, stood 3 tall crystalline pods. Soft blue light filled each pod, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. And inside those pods, they could see them, 3 beings. Not human, but humanoid in shape, tall and slender, maybe 7 feet high, with skin that shimmered like pearl in the blue light. Their features were elegant and strange, beautiful in an alien way. They weren't dead. They were sleeping, waiting. Commander Jack Miller stepped forward slowly, his hand reaching out but not quite touching the nearest pod. His voice came out barely above a whisper, but in that quiet chamber, everyone heard him clearly. "We're not alone," he said. "We never were." Dr. Emily Foster stood in front of the 3 crystalline pods, barely breathing. Her years of studying ancient artifacts had prepared her for many things, but not for this. The alien script carved around each pod pulsed with soft blue light, perfectly in rhythm with the slow, steady breathing of the beings inside. She pulled out a small tablet and began taking photos, her hands shaking slightly. The symbols were beautiful, flowing and organic, nothing like any human writing system, but there was something about them that felt intentional, almost like they were meant to be understood. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to a panel on the side of the nearest pod. Unlike the rest of the ship's smooth surfaces, this panel had clear markings that seemed different. Their own ship can wake them. This panel, it's designed for external activation. See how it's positioned? At human height, easy to reach. The symbols here are simpler than the others. The 12-person international team gathered closer. They had been on the ship for 3 hours now, documenting everything, touching nothing. But now they faced a choice that would change history forever. "Should we?" asked Dr. Wilson, her voice uncertain. "We don't know what will happen. We don't know if they'll be hostile. They've been sleeping peacefully for 12,000 years, Commander Jack Miller said. If they wanted to harm Earth, they've had plenty of chances." The debate went on for hours. They contacted the surface, speaking with Admiral Patterson and the leaders of all 12 nations involved in the project. Scientists argued both sides. Some wanted to wait, study more, be absolutely certain. Others felt they had a responsibility to wake them, that leaving them asleep would be wrong. Finally, they reached a consensus. They hadn't come this far, worked this hard, brought the ship up from 4 miles deep just to leave questions unanswered. Ryan Clark stepped forward. "Let me work with the panel," he said. "I've been studying the ship's system since we came aboard. There's a logic to everything here, a flow that almost makes sense. It's like they wanted someone to find this. Everything is accessible, almost teachable." He approached the panel carefully, his engineer's mind working through the problem. The symbols seemed to respond to his presence, glowing brighter. He touched one gently, and it felt warm under his fingers. A new set of symbols appeared, flowing across the surface like water. "It's showing me a sequence," Ryan said, his voice filled with wonder. "Step by step, first a symbol, then this one, then this one. It's instructions." His hand hovered over the first symbol. This was it, the moment that would change everything. He looked back at Jack, who nodded. Ryan pressed a sequence of symbols exactly as the ship had shown him. The ship responded immediately. A deep, harmonic sound filled the chamber, like the lowest note of a massive organ mixed with singing. It vibrated through the hull, through their bones, through their very souls. It wasn't unpleasant. It was beautiful, almost like music. The blue light in the pods grew brighter and brighter. The team stepped back, giving space, their hearts pounding. The crystalline surface of the pods began to change, becoming translucent, then transparent. Then the pods opened. The first being to wake was clearly female, though her features were different from human women. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with limbs that seemed slightly longer in proportion to her body. Her skin had a pearlescent quality, shifting between soft silver and pale blue, depending on how the light hit it. Her eyes were large and dark, but not frightening. There was intelligence there, and something else. Kindness. Those large eyes opened slowly, focusing gradually on the human surrounding her. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. This was first contact. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for thousands of years. The alien showed no fear, no aggression. Instead, she looked at each face carefully, studying them with what seemed like curiosity and perhaps even joy. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She smiled. It was unmistakably a smile, the same gesture humans used. The corners of her mouth turned up, and her eyes seemed to light up with warmth. Some emotions, it seemed, were universal. She raised one long finger hand and touched a small panel on the wall of her pod. Suddenly, everyone in the chamber heard a voice, but it wasn't coming through their ears. It was coming from inside their minds, gentle and clear, like a thought that wasn't their own. Somehow, impossibly, the ship was translating her thoughts into words they could understand. "You came together," her voice said in their heads, filled with emotion that transcended language. "You worked as one. We knew you would. We hoped you would." Jack Miller found his voice first, though it came out shaky. "You've been waiting for us?" "Yes," she said, and somehow they all knew her name, or at least the closest human sounds had come to it. Arya. Waiting and hoping and believing. The other two pods were opening now. Another being, male, taller than Arya, with the same shimmering skin but with marks or patterns that ran down his arms like natural tattoos. His name came to them as Cade. And a third, also female but younger looking, smaller, with eyes that seemed even larger and more expressive. Lynn. They all woke slowly, blinking in the light, looking at the humans with the same expression of gentle curiosity that Arya had shown. "We are scientists," Arya explained, her mental voice growing stronger as she fully woke. "Explorers from a world that died 12,000 years ago. Our sun failed. It grew old and sick. We had time to prepare, but not enough time to save our world. So our people built colony ships, hundreds of them, and scattered to the stars searching for new homes." "You came to Earth," Emily said softly. "We did," Cade replied, his voice deeper but equally gentle in their minds. "We detected your planet from very far away, the right distance from the sun, water, an atmosphere, life. It seemed perfect. But you were here," Lynn added, and there was warmth in her mental voice. "You were young, just beginning. We watched from orbit for months. We saw you building your first permanent settlements, creating art on cave walls, beginning to farm, beginning to ask questions about the stars." Jack felt his throat tighten. "Why didn't you make contact? You could have taught us so much." Arya stood slowly, her movements graceful despite having been asleep for millennia. "Because you deserve to grow on your own. We could have given you our technology, changed your entire development. But that wouldn't have been right. That wouldn't have been fair. A species must find its own path, make its own mistakes, achieve its own victories. Otherwise, the growth isn't real. We crashed during a storm," Kay continued. "The ship was damaged, but still intact. We had a choice to make. We could stay awake and live among you, but we knew if we did, we would influence your development. We couldn't help ourselves. We would want to teach you, help you, save you from pain. But that would rob you of something precious." Lynn walked to the center of the chamber, looking at each human face with obvious affection. "So we chose to sleep, to trust that one day you would find us, that one day you would be ready to meet us not as children meeting parents, but as equals meeting equals. You waited 12,000 years. Dr. Wilson asked, tears streaming down her face. "You trusted us that much." "We saw your potential," Arya said softly. "In our recordings from orbit, we watched you creating music and art. We saw you caring for your sick and elderly. We saw you laughing and playing and wondering about the stars. We believed that one day you would reach those stars not as conquerors, but as explorers, like us." "So you slept?" Jack said, understanding washing over him. "You trusted us." Arya stepped forward and gently placed her hand on Jack's shoulder. The touch was warm and real. "And you proved us right. When you found our ship, you didn't fight over it among your nations. You didn't try to weaponize it or hide it. You called your entire world together. You raised us with such patience and care. You worked as one people." She looked at each of them, her large eyes shining. "You were ready. You are ready." The months that followed the awakening changed everything about human civilization. It started slowly at first, with simple conversations. Arya, Cade, and Lynn spent weeks just talking with scientists, answering questions, sharing stories about their lost world. They spoke of cities that touched the clouds, of oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life, of a people who had loved art and music and philosophy as much as science. But then they began to share their knowledge, and the real changes started. Medical knowledge came first. Arya was a biologist on her world, and she understood living systems in ways humans had never imagined. She showed doctors how to cure cancer by teaching cells to repair themselves. She explained treatments for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries, simple solutions that had been hiding in plain sight. Within 3 months, children who would have died were playing in hospitals, healthy and laughing. Cade was an engineer, and he revolutionized Earth's energy systems overnight. He showed plans for clean energy generators that pulled power from the fabric of space itself. No more coal, no more oil, no more fighting over resources. Every home could have unlimited clean energy. The air above major cities began to clear for the first time in over a century. Lynn was a mathematician and navigator. She taught human scientists equations for faster-than-light travel, mathematics so elegant and beautiful that physicists wept when they finally understood it. The stars weren't unreachable anymore. They were suddenly within grasp. Admiral Tom Patterson attended every single meeting with the three aliens. He was an old military man, trained to be suspicious, to look for threats, but he found none. During one session, watching Arya explain a new medical technique to a room full of doctors, he finally asked a question that had been bothering him. "Why are you giving us so much?" he asked. "This is knowledge your people spent thousands of years developing. Why share it so freely?" Arya turned to look at him, her large eyes gentle. "Because you earned it, Admiral, not through force or threats or demands. You earned it through how you found us, together, peacefully, patiently. That's worth more than you realize." The world embraced the changes eagerly. Countries that had been rivals for decades started working together on projects using the new technology. Old conflicts seemed smaller somehow, less important when faced with the possibility of reaching the stars. It wasn't perfect. People still argued and disagreed. But something fundamental had shifted in how humanity saw itself. 6 months after the Starship surfaced, Arya asked the international team to gather in the ship's control room. It was the same 12 people who had first entered the ship, plus Admiral Patterson, and a few others who had become close friends with the three aliens. Everyone gathered, curious about why Arya had called this meeting. She stood at the front of the room, with Cade and Lynn beside her. They looked serious, and that made Jack Miller's stomach tighten with worry. "There's something we must tell you," Arya said quietly. "Something we've been waiting for the right moment to reveal. The ship could have surfaced itself any time in the last 1,000 years. All the systems were always fully functional." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. People looked at each other in confusion. Then back at Arya. Ryan Clark spoke first, his voice shaky. "You mean we were being tested? All that work, all those weeks of effort, you could have just brought the ship up yourselves?" Lynn stepped forward, her expression sad but honest. "Not cruelly, Ryan. Please understand that. But we needed to know something important. When humanity finally reached the stars, what would you be? Would you be conquerors looking for new lands to claim? Or explorers looking for new friends to make? Would you divide and fight over new discoveries? Or would you unite?" "You could have just asked us," Lieutenant Dave Roberts said, sounding hurt. Cade shook his head gently. "Words are easy, Dave. Anyone can say they're peaceful. Anyone can claim they would cooperate. But actions reveal the truth. When you found something precious and mysterious at the bottom of your ocean, you had a choice. You chose cooperation over control. You chose patience over speed. You chose to share the discovery with your entire world instead of keeping it for one nation." Arya walked slowly around the room, looking at each person. "We've seen other species reach for the stars. Some of them came together. Many did not. Many destroyed themselves fighting over resources and territory and old hatreds. We needed to know which kind humanity would be." She stopped in front of Jack Miller. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't your technology. You're very clever, yes, but lots of species are clever. Your greatest strength is your ability to unite when it truly matters most, to put aside differences for a common goal. Our people didn't have that," Cade said sadly. "When our sun began to die, we fell apart. Old rivalries between nations resurfaced. Old hatreds that should have been forgotten came back. We built the colony ships, yes, but we fled our world divided and angry. Many ships were lost because crews couldn't work together." Lynn's voice was soft. "But you found us united. 12 nations working as one. Engineers and scientists sharing everything freely. When someone found a problem, everyone worked to solve it. That's when we knew. That's when we were certain you were ready." Dr. Emily Foster wiped tears from her eyes. "So everything we did, the careful assent, the international cooperation, all of it, You were watching to see if we could work together." "Yes," Arya said simply. "And you were beautiful. You were everything we hoped you would be." The anger and hurt in the room slowly faded, replaced by understanding. They had been tested, yes, but they had passed, and the reward was sitting right in front of them. 3 alien friends who believed in humanity enough to share everything they knew. 1 year later, Earth orbit buzzed with construction activity. The first joint human-alien starship was nearly complete. It was called the USS Unity, a name chosen by vote from people all around the world. The ship was massive, built using both human and alien technology, designed by engineers from both species working side by side. Commander Jack Miller stood on the bridge for the first time, running his hands along the smooth alien-human hybrid controls. The crew would be 50 humans carefully selected from 20 different nations, plus Arya, Cade, and Lynn as mentors and guides. Lieutenant Dave Roberts, now promoted to navigation officer, checked his instruments for the 10th time. Course laid in, Commander. First stop is Proxima Centauri, then on to the TRAPPIST system. Jack looked around the bridge at his crew. There was Chun Wei from China working navigation with Roberts. Dr. Wilson from Russia headed the science team. Ryan Clark, now chief engineer, managed the engine room with help from Adeyemi from Kenya and Silva from Brazil. Every station showed the same thing. Different nations, different backgrounds. One crew. Arya stood beside Jack at the captain's chair, looking at the view screen that showed Earth slowly rotating below them. "You're going to do wonderful things out there," she said quietly. Jack smiled. "We learn from the best teachers." "No," Arya corrected gently. "You learn from yourselves. We just gave you the tools. What you build with them, that's all you." In the ship's ready room, Dr. Emily Foster sat at a desk making the final log entry before departure. Her hands moved quickly across the keyboard. "For 12,000 years," she wrote, 3 strangers slept beneath our ocean, waiting for us to be ready. They didn't give us technology to fix us or make us like them. They gave us a mirror to see what we could become when we chose cooperation over conflict. Today, humanity doesn't go to the stars alone. We go as students, as friends, as family to those who believed in us before we even believed in ourselves. She paused, looking out the window at the stars, then continued typing. They tested us, yes, but not with weapons or riddles or impossible tasks. They tested us by giving us a choice. Will we fight over a miracle or share it? We chose to share. And in doing so, we proved we were ready for what comes next. All hands, prepare for jump to light speed. Jack's voice came over the ship speakers. The crew moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. Humans and aliens working together like they'd been doing it for centuries instead of just months. The engine room hummed with power, a sound that mixed human fusion technology with alien spatial manipulation. Jump in 10 seconds. Dave called out, 9, 8, 7. Down on Earth, billions of people stopped what they were doing to watch. In homes and schools and offices, people gathered around screens to witness the moment. Humanity's first faster-than-light ship, leaving to explore the galaxy. 3, 2, 1, jump. The USS Unity stretched, distorted, and then simply vanished in a flash of light. On Earth, in a small apartment in Tokyo, an old woman held her granddaughter's hand as they watched the empty space where the ship had been. "Where did they go, grandmother?" the little girl asked. "To the stars, child," the old woman replied, smiling. "To see what's out there, to make new friends." "Will they come back?" "Oh, yes. And when they do, they'll have such wonderful stories to tell us." The little girl thought about that for a moment. "Grandmother, do you think there are more aliens out there? Besides Arya and Cade and Lynn?" The old woman looked up at the night sky, visible through their window. "I think the galaxy is probably full of people waiting to meet us. And now, finally, we're ready to meet them too." And she was right. The galaxy had been waiting. Not because humans were the smartest species, or the strongest, or the most advanced, but because humanity had finally proven something that mattered more than any of those things. They had proven that when it really mattered, when the future of their species hung in the balance, they could choose to work together instead of tear each other apart. They had proven they could be good, and that, in the end, was all that really mattered.